Hello everyone, how are you doing? This is Daryl Guberman. I'm the CEO of Guberman PMC LLC, a quality consulting firm here in Connecticut. The rest of the data will be found down below this video. This video is based on several videos I put out. One in particular was with China's okay, Lockheed Martin closes in on the purchase of Sikorsky Aircraft. You'll find this in the body right down below in the description below this video. Today, this video is about Lockheed Martin's F-35 factory flaws persist after 800 aircraft are built. QA expert Daryl Guberman exposes why. We have several special guests here, but let me give you the history about Lockheed Martin. In 2009, Lockheed Martin gets hacked by China taking the F-35. In 2012, a division of United Technologies at the time, Sikorsky Aircraft, gets hacked by China, taking their data. In 2015, Lockheed Martin purchases Sikorsky Aircraft for over $9 billion. And in that year, in the Connecticut Mirror, the title of the article was, "With China's okay, Lockheed Martin closes in on the purchase of Sikorsky Aircraft." In that article, it said, Connecticut lawmakers praise Lockheed Martin for working with an international regulator, and those four people are Rosa DeLauro, Richard Blumenthal, Jim Himes, and Christopher Murphy, all complimenting Lockheed for working with communist China. So this may not be in their office, but I'm sure they use this as a bedspread and or pillowcases. This is what they have hanging, more than likely, in their house. Right here. Or shall we do it this way? I think this might be a better position. Here we go. This is what they have hanging in their house without a doubt, praising a company for working with communist China. And that company had their data taken by this country. And then we have a very special guest to solidify this mess. We have a Mr. Christopher Wray. Christopher Wray is the director of the FBI. Every time he gets inquisitioned by Congress or Senate, he says the same old song and dance. Here he is. Chris, thank you very much for coming in from Washington, D.C. I appreciate it. And this is what he says. He says that the whole of the Chinese society is a threat to the United States and that Americans must step up to defend themselves. Well, Chris, I must say this. It is not the whole of China, but it is their political figures that are the disaster for America, just like it is here with our political figures like Rosa DeLauro, Jim Himes, Christopher Murphy, and of course, Richard Blumenthal. And here you are, and here he stands beating his Chinese manufactured drum all the time. The sad part, business owners, before we get into this Lockheed fiasco, the sad part is that Christopher Wray's FBI sits on ANSI's board. They've been sitting there for a long time. In fact, they sat there between 2015 and 21 when Zhao Jinwu, a communist Chinese national, you'll see that on a flowchart very shortly, was the chairman, handed over chairmanship to the IAF, which is incorporated in Delaware. Now, the IAF is a organization that has many accreditation bodies on board, like ANSI, the American National Standards Institute, and ANAB, the American National Accrediting Board, which ANSI took over in 2018. The FBI sits there, they've gotten their data taken, and that is a problem. I don't know how inept Christopher Wray is. He just says that China's bad. I'm sure he knows that his own federal agency has gotten hacked. But one of the reasons why is that they sit on the organization that brings in and hugs China, kisses them, and probably tucks them in at night. Isn't that tender? So we're going to go on. I told you about Lockheed Martin, 2019, 2009, Sikorsky, 2012, 2015, Lockheed buys it. And people are saying, what do you mean by that, Daryl? Can you show us any proof? Well, the proof is in the pudding, ladies and gentlemen, and business owners. And you take a look at this. You have the F-35 over here, Lockheed, and here's the Chinese J-31. You definitely know that the data was taken. This is even more convincing. You have the Black Hawk over here, Sikorsky, or actually Lockheed Sikorsky now, and you have the Z-20 Chinese aircraft. Yes, the data was definitely taken. We're going to continue on. And we have many things to show you. We have also a Mr. James Tassett. And before we go in even deeper, we want to tell you, Jim, that your organization is sitting by on ANSI's board. Their chairman, Mr. Russ Cheney, in 2009 called me and said, half a nut, fuck you. Now, do you approve of that? Because your organization, by sitting on ANSI's board, is complicit to what he said. Because he's the chairman. The chairman of ANSI, the organization Lockheed sits on, and Boeing, of course, and the DHS, and also the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and so many other federal organizations, agencies, and also corporations sit there, and also on their board of directors. This is absolutely deplorable. So I'm going to ask you, do you approve of that? Do you approve of that as a CEO? Because it appears you do. You haven't done anything about it yet. Maybe you don't know. Maybe this is the first thing you're hearing about. But I'm going to play this for you, if I may, before we continue, because I want you to hear this, Jim. Now, Russ Cheney is in the wings because we asked him to come along with Joe Bathia and their incompetent attorney, Mr. Jameson Carroll of Carroll and Weiss in at Atlanta, Georgia. And we're going to play this for you. And here's the three stooges. And I hate to use those terms, stooges, but in the quality arena, it means incompetence, incompetence, and incompetence. And here we go. Yes, he did say that. Jim, I'm going to tell you what we did. We did anything that any respectable individual, whether CEO or not, manager or not, would do. We sent a letter to Mr. Joe Bathia. Mr. Joe Bathia sent it up to their attorney, Jameson Carroll. Now, this guy's a CEO. He could have stopped it. He should have actually talked to the lawyer, and they should have sent me back an apology letter. Instead, let me play this for you, if I may. Is Jameson Carroll here? I think he is. Yes, Jameson Carroll is here. And this is what he said. I'm going to put these three characters down. And this is what he said, Jim, about... This is Russ Cheney. Please leave a message and I'll return your call as soon as possible. Record your... Yes, Jim, he did say half a nut, fuck you, and this was his response. So they approved and condoned what this gentleman said. In 2022, Jim, I applied for a director-at-large position with ANSI. Yes, I did. I figured that I could change their, I could change their whole perspective, their whole quality mantra that Russ made in 2019 and maybe before. Who the heck knows? So we put this in, Jim, and there we go. 54 pages, 16 of those pages, Jim, 16 of those pages were recommendation letters from my customers, okay? There was a 9-question addition that I'd have to add as to what Daryl Guberman brings to the table for ANSI. Well, the first thing I would do is I would get rid of their mission statement right here, wouldn't you? Because it doesn't make your company look any better, nor Boeing, nor any federal agency that sits on there or corporation. And what I did was I answered those questions. Because right now, if you look at the 2022 board, they have not one person that represents at all the small mom and pop shops that supply your organization with a lot of parts, a lot of components. Come from the small 5, 10, 20, 30, 50, even 100 person shop. Okay, and that's relatively small when it comes to supply. Okay, so I filled it out. I did what I said. I said, I would like to be a part of ANSI's team, and I didn't tell them at the first that I want to get rid of their half a nut fuck you deal. But you know something? As we did the questionnaire, this is what was said at the end of the questionnaire. The committee appreciates your interest in serving in an ANSI leadership position and your willingness to provide us this additional information. Sincerely, Russ Cheney. So what is that telling you, Jim? Do you think, you're a human being, you're not a robot. What do you think? Do you think that he is going to pick me for the board? Absolutely not. So we continue on. ANSI, the American National Standards Institute, is a private, not-for-profit, non-governmental corporation that has both federal agencies and corporations on board. And by the way, Jim, thank you for coming in here. You have this, and this is a very important item here, Jim, and here's the flow chart. You have Randy Doty, okay? At the time, he was the vice president of ANAB, the chairman of the IAF in 2015, and also the principal on the IAF tax report 990. He handed over leadership to Zhao Jinwu, a communist Chinese national who's been involved with our quality since 1994, who is also the chief executive of the China National Accreditation Services that certified the suspect lab in Wuhan, China. In 2017, Randy was being advertised on the Department of Homeland Security, which also sits as a member on ANSI. Okay, all of these federal agencies, both Jim and Christopher Wray, have had their data taken. Okay, there's no pulling punches. You want the data? I could give it to you. I probably have more data than the FBI does. But anyway, he's standing there in the lab in 2017 while Randy was being advertised on the DHS website. Cybersecurity issues? Possibly. We don't know. You have an American on the DHS who handed over leadership of the IAF to this communist Chinese national. The communist Chinese national is mandated by China, and you should know this, Chris, with China National Intelligence Law, Article number 7, which mandates espionage, okay? Randy was being advertised. Maybe it's because you had a Phil Matson from the DHS who was getting paid $262,000 and change as a royalty payment, which is non-taxable per the IRS requirements or description. And he sits on ANSI's board getting his federal salary plus $262,000 stipend, I guess, from ANSI, okay? So you have all of this mess with the DHS. I exposed that. They took Randy off, okay, when I exposed it. Zhao Jinwu, standing in the lab in the Bio 4 Level 4 laboratory in Wuhan, China, that more than likely released the virus per Pamela Sale, who is the vice president of accreditation for laboratory. And she said under deposition in Texas that from one laboratory to another, there are variances. No protocols per se. There's none. You have ANSI, who took over complete control over ANAB in 2018. You have federal agencies and corporations on board. Jim, this was in the Washington Post. This shows you the weapon systems, F-35, Black Hawk, etc., that were taken by China. We tried to warn your organization, which I don't know if you were involved with it at the time. We tried to warn your organization. We got a reply back from a Miss Lisa Gross, a SAS ethics officer, who said this. She said, Daryl Guberman, in order to meet our customer requirements, Lockheed Martin deals with entities that are certified through the International Accreditation Form IAF. Your company is not a registrar of the IAF, and therefore your accreditation is not recognized by Lockheed Martin. Well, it's very simple to say that on Lockheed's procedures, it states verbatim that your third-party auditor has to be ANSI, ANAB, IAF. So they already invited China in at that time. In 2015, we tried to warn them. They didn't listen. In fact, here's a procedure from Lockheed, one of their procedures. I know it's an older procedure, but even in the new ones, they try to bury it deep, but it still says ANSI, ANAB. To make matters worse, she talks about the IAF. You want to hear about impropriety, Jim? Here it is. Between 2015 and 21, Lockheed Martin sat on the IAF during the time when she said we only accept IAF. Don't you think something's wrong with that? On top of that, Lockheed Martin is an associate member which can vote on policy. At that time, Iran and Pakistan, okay, both of them who admitted to harboring some of the terrorists of 9/11 in Pakistan, who harbored Osama bin Laden, okay, all sat by Lockheed Martin on that board, along with ANSI and ANAB. You also have this. This is why business owners, Bell Helicopter, will probably get that contract rescinded and given to Lockheed Martin. And here is their flow chart. As you can see, they were watched over by communist China, all of them, because they sit on ANSI, from 2015 to 2021. And ANSI, ANAB sit on the IAF at that time and still do. You have federal agencies, corporations, Lockheed and Boeing sitting there happily, and the federal agencies that appropriate funding for those aircraft, for the replacement of the Black Hawk, all sit with Lockheed and Boeing. We have we have the quality issues here with Lockheed Martin. In fact, again, this video is about Lockheed's F-35 factory flaws persist even after 800 aircraft are built. QA expert Daryl Guberman exposes why, and I am. We will gladly give you this information. That's going to be in the description. There's just a certain amount of room on there, so if this is not, please contact me and I will give you the information. I'll send it to you. You have, again, Jim, for example, Boeing. Boeing was fudging documentation. What is that saying about the integrity of the organization? It's leadership, not the people who work below that. It's their leadership. Here's some findings that were found in a 2013 description of when the program of the F-35 was starting. And here it is. Here it is almost 10 years later, and you still have quality issues. And this is what the government said. The F-35 program, let me hold you up, Jim. The F-35 program did not sufficiently implement or flow down technical and quality system requirements to prevent the fielding of non-conforming hardware and software. This could adversely affect aircraft performance, reliability, maintainability, and ultimately program cost. Lockheed Martin Company, Lockheed Martin, and its subcontractors did not follow disciplined AS9100 quality management system practices, and the same thing went for Pratt & Whitney, their engine manufacturer. The same exact rejection. So let's continue on. As I said, Lockheed Martin gets hacked in 2009. Lockheed Martin gets hacked. And there are problems. Of course, I showed you those problems. There we go. You also have the factor on CNN. There was an article about Lockheed being hacked in 2009 from China. There's another article concerning that. I'll gladly send you these articles, business owners. They may be in the description, as I told you. You have the NSA writing about the disgusting hacking job that China did concerning Lockheed Martin. You have the factor that the FAA sits on ANSI's board, right over by Boeing, by the way. And Jim, if I may say this, Boeing in 2002 put out a procedure for their suppliers that said if you're AS9100, you know what that is. It's an ISO standard for aerospace. If you're ISO 9100 or AS9100, we don't have to send in any sort of quality team to look at your facility. Just send us the parts and you're good to go. I'm not saying that happens all the time, maybe 97% of the time, but that's what they had, a procedure that went out in 2002, which means for 21 years, they've been accepting parts like that. That's why, you also have the factor that the FAA succeeded inspection with Boeing, okay? And that's you're dealing with Boeing with the Defiant, the Defiant aircraft that you're trying to get the government to purchase rather than do the Bell. Yes, and they were also caught fudging documentation. Do you really want a partner to be fudging documentation on a critical military aircraft, Jim? I want to really ask you that from a quality professional such as me of 40 plus years. Do you really want that? Do you want the factor that you have so many deficiencies on the F-35 that those deficiencies may be built into the Defiant? I'll have a lot of people start squawking about that, but so be it. But it's very true. And then you take a look at Boeing still. Let's go further with Boeing with their fudging and all this other stuff. You have Boeing that sits on ANSI right over by Lockheed Sikorsky. You also have Boeing that sits on the board of ANAB, their accreditation body that they have on their supplier portal that says third-party auditors must be ANSI, ANAB, or IF, inviting again communist China in between 2015 and 21. You also have, oh my God, you also have the factor that on the 737 MAX, the FAA that sits right by them and you on ANSI succeeded inspection, which means, of course, they gave inspection up to not Lockheed, but they gave it up to Boeing to build the 737 MAX, which, as we know, has quality issues. The Boeing 777 and 787 all have quality issues. And it stems from managers that say, oh, let's, not even managers, it starts with senior managers that say, oh, let's write this procedure and go to town. We don't, it costs too much to send inspectors out to those facilities anyway. We'll do cost-cutting measures. They get a performance bonus. They also probably step away from the company. They got their money and they run. They really don't care. They really don't care about the people who work for them. And remember this, the guy who's the riveter, the gal who's the riveter, the bonder, the engineer, they care about their jobs, Jim. You, on the other hand, I guess you care how cold your martini is and maybe how if your cigar is lit or not. That is what we look at from our perspective, okay? When I went to the ASQ meetings many years ago, there was never the vice president of quality there, but there were the supervisors, inspectors, and managers. There was never anybody of significance that stopped off at the ASQ and listened to the quality issues because they do not care. All the senior quality people care about is their cigar and martini and what company can I jump to next for a performance bonus. I don't hate to say that. I've been in quality for 40 years. I'm just telling you the truth. You also have the Department of Defense. The same organization that's going to sign off the appropriations for the new Black Hawk sits right over by Lockheed and Boeing. As I showed you in the beginning of this video, you know that data was taken. Here are the copycats from China compared to the American military aircraft. It's the same. And the last thing I'm going to say, Jim, is when your F-35 crashed, had the landing gear issue, which has been very pervasive throughout the manufacture of that aircraft. They've had landing gear issues throughout its life cycle. ANSI-ANAB state that we only certify the system. We don't certify the product. We discovered that no, it's not true because they are underwriters for the IF, International Accreditation Form. So any body that is on there is equivalent in accreditation to ANAB. We have that. You can find it in the rest of the videos down below, Jim. So when you have a failure of the landing gear, that's a quality failure. By them being an underwriter, they are responsible for the quality. If they never said anything, they're really not responsible. It's tough to pin it on them. But by them saying it, especially on a government contract, where it says that ANAB is an underwriter, ANSI-ANAB is an underwriter for the International Accreditation Form incorporated in Delaware. And at this time, Jim, when they said this on the contract, by them saying the IAF, they invited Communist China in there because Communist China was running the whole show there, okay, at the IAF. Jim, we're going to leave it here. I think we've talked enough. I don't want it to go on to 30 minutes. But this video today was about Lockheed Martin factory flaws persist even after 800 aircraft are built. QA expert Daryl Guberman exposes why. But I'm going to say this to those Bell employees. By Lockheed, Sikorsky, and Boeing all sitting on ANSI's board, okay, right over by the Department of Defense who appropriates, okay, financing for the new Black Hawk derivative, or actually the replacement. You have issues, a very hard issue indeed. Remember this, it is as if David is fighting Goliath, Bell being David, and Lockheed being Goliath. Jim, once again, their dispensing of quality may be half a nut fuck you. It appears with all the rejections and discrepancies that your organization has, I could clean it up in 6 months if given the opportunity. And that is a guarantee. 203-556-1493 or Daryl, TQRS@yahoo.com. I don't know whether that's a nervous smile you have because you know the quality issues are very bad at Lockheed. And Boeing too, your second company that is working on the Defiant. But you know something? You can't fix what's really broken because it's broken bad. Again, 203-556-1493 or Daryl, TQRS@yahoo.com. I thank you. Jim, thank you for coming in. And also, Christopher Ray, thank you. Keep on beating your Chinese manufactured drum. It ain't going to work, my friend. Thank you.